My wife found a basement below our basement. Shirelle was standing at my bedside in her navy nightgown with her arms crossed. Crossed in a pissed off sort of way. Crossed like I just picked up the phone at the dinner table, or crossed like I accidentally agreed that her friend Angela was cute again. "Shop's closed tonight," I groggily joked. "No, what?" "No, I don't want what's for sale." She walloped my crotch with a rolled-up magazine from the nightstand. Okay, I propped myself up against the headboard. "So what did I do?" "We've been living here for 2 years, Michael. 2 years, and you haven't thought to mention the room in the basement. What are you hiding from me down there, huh?" "Honey, you must have had a bad dream. Unless, of course, you're referring to the laundry room." "No, I'm not, honey," she snarled. "You must have left the door open to this mystery room for the wind to catch because it woke me right out of bed." I squinted up at her, still dazed from counting sheep. "Okay, fine, you win. Show me." Following my wife down our dimly lit hallway, I was convinced she was sleepwalking. I often play this same game with the kids, where you know something to be blatantly untrue, but suspend disbelief to keep the fun going. My youngest, Richie, he still thinks that I believe his account of seeing the Tooth Fairy, otherwise known as, well, me. Thinking of Rich, I peered my head into the crack of his bedroom door to half check on him, half check that he wasn't the up-to-no-gooder making the racket in our basement. The streak of light from the hallway painted his drooling face. He growled a low snore, comatose from his spaghetti bolognese NyQuil. I creaked open a door further down the hall. Rose was there, check. Tommy was in his bedroom too. Shirelle turned around and snapped at me. "Come, Michael," she said. "I don't want you thinking of any excuses before I make it downstairs and see this." We purchased our quaint little home the fall before last. The house was at the end of the short cul-de-sac, backed against a small mountain that the native tribes had once named Icha. It took me a couple of chats with the folks living on my street to spell it, given how it was pronounced, Icha. Being next to the mountain has given rise to the sort of anxiety I didn't know I had. A nagging fear of people judging our home from a bird's eye view, hiking the hill and pointing and laughing at our clogged gutters or botched roof tile job. Though Shirelle and I had agreed this lovely spot was otherwise perfect. A suburban paradise where we now raise our 3 children. So I suppose that outweighs the creeping anxiety. The surrounding landscape, beautiful, picturesque, as if living inside a desktop wallpaper. The neighborhood was warm and lively too. And well, when I say neighborhood, I mean the 5 or 6 homes that circle the bud at the end of the cul-de-sac. Everyone else down the line is a stranger to Shirelle and me. We didn't hear much about the people who lived in the home before us, except from Old Man Raj, one of our neighbors, a couple of weeks after we moved in. "The couple before you had their pick of problems," he said one day as we were unloading groceries from the back of our SUV. I watched him for a while as he vacantly reminisced, staring up at our home through his thickly lensed glasses. "They were always having builders in, repairmen, busy vans and trucks. That sort of thing." He shot over a wise look, one native to old men. The sort of face that carries disguised worry that the world is going bad. "There's been no such thing as peace the year that they were here. No siree. Good folk though. Tom was the man's name." "Well, we're the quiet types, so don't worry," I said. "You have my word. No pedal to the metal on the sports car until I'm well around the corner." Shirelle giggled as she carried a bag into the house. "Did the couple end up settling down somewhere else? I can't imagine that it was a problem with the neighbors or school. Hell, even the house is in pretty good nick." A little DIY to boot, but nothing that would make me or Sher want to move out. They went missing, the both of them. He trailed off, before resuming his walk, cane in one hand and a dog leash in the other. Cops think they were on a hunting trip ill-prepared, and the elements got 'em. I say the husband done it, but it ain't up to me to say. I watched his wiry gray hair bob away and out of the street. Then my eyes shifted to my wife through her window, feeling glad she couldn't hear our conversation. And that was the last I had heard of Raj, or the family that lived in our pretty white picket fence house before us. At least that was, until the night my wife brought me down to our basement. I could have sworn it was right there. My wife had never looked so frantic. I was actually rather worried. It was here, she reassured herself. Like a block of the floor had just pried open like a trap door. I stood by her for a while, away from the basement lights so she could see properly. Shirelle was sprawled across the concrete floor of our basement, running her finger down the cracks in the ground, looking for any sort of opening. Must have been a nightmare, hun, I said, pinching off a yawn, not to sound too dismissive. Shush, she said, rubbing something on the ground. Oh, yes! Do you see this? She shouted. I leaned over her shoulder to see what she was digging at. Her blurry eyes looked up to me as she showed off her fingerful of dust. I vacuumed down here yesterday and look! She wiped the muck away from her index. It's from the room. Must have missed a spot, I said. Nope, she snapped. Why don't you trust me? I argued. Because you're not being honest, she rebutted. You're not yourself, Shirelle. And you are hiding something. We both crawled back into bed later that night, defeated and without knowing. If there's one thing I hate about matrimony, it's having to sleep next to the person you just argued with, for better or for worse. I mean, there's always the couch, but our argumentative nights turn into Civil War weeks if I pick that option. Besides, there's a wide skylight in our living room so the people climbing Itcha can see me drooling all over my pillow like a Neanderthal. I hate that damn mountain. Saturday mornings are always a bit of a double-sided prick for me. Early on, I take Tommy to soccer and bring some sliced fruit with me to cover our team's teeth with. Yeah, I'm the orange slice guy. Kids love me. Adults wish they were me. I have to say, Tommy's pretty good at sports, though he's never scored a goal. I guess that's because he's always on the defense. Later on in the morning, I drop Tommy back off home and then I'm in the city around 10, just in time for my appointment with Molly. I usually call her by her maiden name, Satan, but my wife just calls her by her job title, psychiatrist. Potato, potato. You look rather unslept, Michael. Satan was speaking to me from the corner of her small office, glaring at me over the fake plants on the coffee table. I had to wake up early and cut up some fruit for my son's game. You know how it is, I said. Doesn't that take long? She scribbled something down on paper. Did it happen again last night? Ah, here we go. I stretched back in my chair. At least this part, the chair, felt like $100 an hour. Her episode wasn't that bad this time. What was she doing? Digging, I think. She woke me up at, say, midnight and brought me down there again. But this time she was digging away at the concrete like a mad dog. Don't think she remembered it by daylight, though. Don't get me wrong, though, Doc. She's not alone in this delirium. Sometimes I think I hear a woman sobbing down there, too. Folie à deux, shared psychosis. How do her episodes make you feel? These guys make a living off that question. I hate seeing her like that, Molly. I do, I said. Satan pushed her glasses up to the bridge of her nose and wrote something else down. Michael, I asked how it made you feel. Sad, I said. Sometimes I wish these shrinks would break character, act a little unprofessional. It would spice up the hours that I spend sitting in chair jail. Sad? Just sad? Really pulling the big boy words out from the wrinkles of your brain, aren't you, Mikey? I imagined Molly saying, passive-aggressively. But no, she just sat there all studious-like, waiting for me to trickle more meager words out. Sad, but also scared. I said as I was a goddamn toddler. Like when I'm looking at Shirelle, I'm looking at somebody sleepwalking, knowing it's not them. Yeah, sometimes I'm scared. Well, maybe she is sleepwalking. Shouldn't you have her in this damn chair instead then? I blurted out. Why the hell am I here? There was a palpable silence in the shrink's office, save for the big round clock that kept on tick-tick-ticking. She cleared her throat after a while. Well, Michael. I could see her perching her lips, loading her verbal gun. The next bullet to put me down like some sort of quick-witted cowboy dropping a one-liner in a western flick. Because it was your daughter that died, too. Bullet? No. Try a 1,000-ton anchor made of her familiar words dragging me back down to earth in crashing flames. I like to think it's the little things that lift me up. Listening to my favorite records in the coupe, taking Tommy to soccer, eating a steak that is perfectly medium rare and seared on the outside. But leave it up to none other than Dr. Satan every Saturday morning to bring me back down to hell. Back to the night when Amy went missing and never came home. Died? My daughter is missing, not dead, I said. You've started referring to her in the past tense these last couple of months, Mike. Sorry. I thought you knew. Oh. Your wife doesn't think that way. She has hope. And well, this hope, maybe she thinks Amy is somehow alive below the basement, Michael. At least in a fantasy. She scribbled. But it will heal in time. You both will. We grieve differently. But I think in the meantime, just play along. She's coping. One day you'll wake up and not think of your daughter. Shirelle's nightmares will fade. So will the pain. I grabbed a tissue from the coffee table and went for the door, my wet eye catching that there were still many minutes left on the clock. Michael, she started. Thanks for the session. See you next week, Molly. Sometimes I take the long way home. Molly says it's unhealthy, an avoidance of feelings I need to confront, that I'm afraid of the Saturday quiet, sitting around the house doing nothing on the weekend and letting the thoughts creep in. I suppose in a way that is a bit childish, the long route home, that is. The adult equivalent of meandering through high school corridors on the way to detention, or chatting away incessantly to the dentist, just so he can stick his metal tools in your mouth. Detention, dentist. Temporary misery for long-term improvement. And I guess going home and chatting with my wife on the Saturday is good for me in the end too. But when I'm in my coupe, I am free. I listen to the rise and settle of each gear under the bonnet. And only the back streets let me reach 6th. This is what men refer to as healing. Funny, ain't it? I rolled up my driveway sometimes after noon and put the car into park. Sure, I miss working from home, but returning to the office has given me a newfound appreciation for the weekend. When you're working from home, everything turns blurry in your periphery when you see it 1,000 times a day. Observing things around you but not, like street lamps flying by a speeding car. But on the weekend, I breathe in every detail. I savor each and every moment that I'm away from the fax machine. I began taking notice of what birds were making a home out of our gutter, all the plants my wife had been putting into the garden, the wide dent in the back of her car that was shaped like a small animal. I noticed that Tommy had scribbled a small sheet of paper and taped it to the door, brilliantly labeled Toilette, appreciating all the things I would have otherwise been blind to if I was stuck at home for another month. I shut the door to the bathroom on my way out, thinking about how Tommy's handwriting had gone from looking like abstract art to the font from a heavy metal band. "We need to talk," said my wife, staring at me down the hallway. "Uh-oh." "But I just did the whole talking thing," I replied, defeated. She curled a finger and led me into the kitchen. "Where's the ice cream gone?" she asked. "I hope you're not accusing me instead of one of our children, darling." She hissed out some air. "If Tommy ate it, I'd definitely see some evidence. This here." Shirelle popped open the container of ice cream, exposing the colossal crater within. "This is the work of a criminal mastermind." "Share, hand to God," I raised a few fingers. "Wasn't me." Tommy turned his head around at the sound of ice cream like that one scene out of The Exorcist. "Can I finish it?" he said, only barely managing to peel his eyes free of SpongeBob, flopping his arms over the couch back. "Did you finish your homework?" I pressed. "Not yet, but I—" Shirelle took charge. "After the assignment." But, Tom started. "It's not fair. How come Amy gets to eat it all and I don't get any?" Silence. Shirelle and I exchanged glances. We grieve differently. Molly's words glowed in my mind like a hot iron. Then, after a while, the silence was gone. There was no more talk of his missing sister. With no ice cream to go around, Tommy turned around, the sponge giggling from the television. It must have been 4 or 5 when I woke up early Sunday morning. I remained on my side, watching the bare fingers of the branches outside dance in the wind and scrape against the window pane. If I sat still, I could hear a deeper skittering, one not coming from the glass, one echoing from deeper in the house, like somebody moving furniture. My wife lay flat, too, breathing with the heaviness of being fast asleep. I slinked out of our duvet with the gracefulness figure skaters can only aspire for, one reserved for husbands tiptoeing out of bed to pee. My body drew cold when I turned around. She was watching me from the bed with wide, billiard ball eyes, googly eyes, like they were stuck onto her eyelids, open, but not quite seeing. "Honey?" I whispered. No response, only a low, terrifying moan that fell out of her open mouth. My feeling of alarm fell to the wayside when I realized she was having one of her sleepwalking episodes. Just one without the walking. I shook myself right and pressed on. Luckily, the first set of stairs paved my way without so much as a creak. Though when I reached the second set leading to the basement, my body felt heavy. It was difficult to push forward. It was as if some inkling of intuition stirred within me. Some part of me wanted to pull away. I thought hard for a while, my hand around the cold door handle, unwilling to turn. And then thoughts of my wife finally came, and so did the knowing that it was finally time to put her grievances and delusions to rest. Descending the basement, I noticed my gracefulness had gone away, replaced by an apparent jitteriness, fueled by the fear of the dark that had been long lost. I pressed the basement light switch, and it flickered on in several cold strobes. Visually, the room was the same as it always was. Vacant, musty, void of color or decoration. But most curiously, the floor beckoned inspection. Something about it was magnetic, as if it had miraculously become the centerpiece overnight. Once at the bottom of the stairs, I noticed that there was a muffled hum that overtook the silence. It sounded like a low throb of a car driving past the suburb with a throbbing bass tone. I kneeled to take a closer look for dust and to listen to the sound coming from the floor. My wife was right. It was dusty, but nothing that could have just been dislodged from the ceiling. A disheartening rumbling filled the air, and my heart leapt into my throat. Kneeling on the floor, had managed to apply enough pressure to crack the square in the floor open like a trapdoor. It sounded like the ground was about to collapse. As I shifted around, the quiet crumbling of rock seemed to come from beneath the concrete. Eventually, the floor pried open on a hinge enough to see into. Below was no basement, and barely a room. Rather, it was a small passageway containing a long ladder to another trapdoor below. I blew away the clouds of unsettled dust and rock which had coated my tongue and throat in an earthy taste. Before climbing into the hole, I grabbed a small torch from a drawer of the workbench. Pinching it between my teeth, I descended the shoddy ladder with both my hands. Paternal hope is a senseless thing. The closer I got to the trapdoor below my feet, the more the flame of hope emboldened. With it burned any doubts in my mind. It didn't matter that deep down I knew she had no access to food, no clean water for months. At least for that fleeting moment, she had to be alive. She had to be down. Gales sucked through the open door hole like a torn plane. My foot stung from kicking the door with my heel. The space below me was an empty void as I hung from a ladder step. The only sound was that of rushing wind and water below, save for the occasional groaning from the hinge of the broken trapdoor. When my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I set upon a sight like no other. A great gushing waterfall cascaded from one tall wall. The wall itself was coated with a black mold or vegetation that was barely discernible in the dying cone of my torch. Rays of the basement light trickled in through the ladder, leaving shadowed striations by the hissing mist of the crashing water some 50 feet below. As easily as I had come down the ladder, I went straight up after realizing what I needed to do next. I ripped open drawers of the basement, looking for anything that would help me down the bottom of the cave, or at least to get Amy up to the house. She had to be down below. She had to be. Spanners and nails went flying as I tore open cabinets. Knowing the flashlight was dying, I pulled a wrench from the rack off the wall and wrapped the top up in an oiled cloth. I also pulled out a rope that were bracing a kayak up against the wall, tying it to my waist as I returned to the hole in the ground. Back down the rungs I went, each metallic step echoing into the chamber below. I fell to a rocky outthirst just beneath the ladder. It served as a cliff of sorts overlooking the massive ravine, where the basement light couldn't quite reach the bottom, but would provide enough light to sort myself out before heading down. "Amy!" I screamed out. No sound ever came back, only that of my voice bouncing between the cavern walls and the dark. After one of the ends of the ropes was securely fashioned around a protruding rock, I let the rest of it fly down to the ground below. Leaning over the cliff with nothing but my rope to guide me down, I felt terrified. I hadn't been climbing for a decade. I took a deep breath, faced my back to the blackness which seemed to go unending, and began my descent. It was colder at the bottom of the ravine. Lighting the oiled cloth on my wrench with the Zippo in my pocket provided me with a torch and some warmth, but it didn't stop the claustrophobic emptiness that seemed to close in at every turn. I began walking to my right, always sticking to the wall. That way, I knew I wouldn't get lost. "Amy!" I called out. More and more gnats seemed to fly around my light source as I kept walking forward. The amber light of the torch caught something in the dark. Not exactly an uneven rock formation or limestone, but something pale. And it was coming for me. I screamed and turned tail. The steps behind me seemed to grow louder as I ran, and I wasn't so sure that I could make it back to the rope in time. Hands wrapped around me and turned me to my side, and in that moment the woman in the dark filled my vision with her ghastly stare. "Oh my God, Tom, someone has come for us!" she screamed. Words couldn't trickle out just yet. I was busy trying to wrestle free from her grip. When I did, I swung the torch in front of her. She was a pale, bony woman with scraggly clothing that had not been changed in weeks, months. "Put the torch out," she whispered, as if not wanting to be heard. "Please, put it out." From my periphery, I saw a man enter the ring of light emanating from my torch. He too was starved and unkempt. The two of them were holding up their hands submissively, their fingernails long and encrusted with grime. Who are you?" I demanded. "You have to put it out, please," the man said, his voice as if a snake was trying to speak. "And please keep your voice down." I stood my ground, not letting the couple get any closer. Their ghastly faces stared at me unblinkingly, like they had not seen a person, let alone light, in a long time. "My daughter," I started, always walking backwards to the safety of my rope. "Have you seen her? Amy, is she down here?" The woman's eyes shifted to mine, then the torch, then back to my face. I could tell that she was going to launch at me soon, at any cost to extinguish my flame. "Yes, we've seen the girl." "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm Tom, and this is my wife, Jeanette Mosley. We live at the house up above. We thought nobody was ever going to come for us, we thought." "You mustn't speak so loudly," she interrupted her husband. "What's going on? Where's my daughter?" I watched the woman's long, pencil-like finger point at the bleak nothingness of the cave. There's something down there," she whispered before leaning in closer. "Something that wears human faces." "But it's not human, it's," whispered the man, his expressions wide-eyed and hopeless. There was a different feeling to the gloom surrounding us then, as if the walls were closing in, as if we were being watched. "If you don't put the torch out, it's going to find us. It's going, oh my God," she warned before her eyes lit up. "There's a rope." The man dove at her and wrapped his fingers around her lips so she couldn't make a noise. But it was too late. Her whimpers told me that it was, and at that moment, I knew she decided to make a run for an escape. She elbowed me in the cheek as she wrestled her husband away from her, sprinting past me and up to the cliff face. Jeanette latched onto the rope and kicked her way up as far as she could. Her arms were frail, and I wasn't sure if she could make it the whole way. It was clear the couple hadn't eaten in weeks, their muscles eating away at itself, trying to refuel their bodies. By around halfway up the cliff, Tom and I held the same look on our faces, staring up in terror at the woman climbing, as if watching a plane explode in the sky. I'm not exactly sure what made the woman let go of the rope. It might have been the thing in the darkness, or the beads of sweat between her frail, shaking fingers. But when she fell, her skull against the rock sounded like a fish being dropped into an empty sink. "Oh God!" Tom screamed. "Oh God, my Jen, no, 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 no!" he chanted as he kneeled. I felt sick to my stomach when I backed over the tiny red rivers that were forming between the rocks. The fluid from the cavity in her head soaked up into Tom's jeans, and he screamed. When he did, something deeper in the cave did too. There was a sound of something shifting in the blackness, not wanting to be heard. I made my way to the rope as fast as I could, my heartbeat pounding in my chest. Before I did, I tried to tug Tom away from his wife. What was left of her jaw sat open wide, something that reminded me, again, of a fish. My stomach churned with that thought, and I tugged him so hard he almost fell flat on his face as he stood up. "We need to go!" I yelled. "I don't know if you can make it all the way, so I'm going to go up first and pull you." His hand left maroon-colored fingerprints as he held his head, but I knew he was nodding. "It's going to come for me. No, I'm going to pull you, Tom, okay?" I repeated as I gripped the rope, extinguished the flame, and began climbing. It was a lot more difficult to climb up than descend. Each rock that my foot landed on seemed to me laden with a slimy growth. When I was partially up, I managed to throw the extinguished torch up onto the platform. At that height, I could no longer see the man below me, but I knew that he was there because he was tensing the line. Once at the top, the cool basement light that streamed through the ceiling put all the stains on my clothing on visceral display. "Tom, grab the rope now! I'll pull you up!" I readied my hands around the line, noticing abrasions from sliding down earlier. "Ready when you are!" Silence. "Tom?" Still no reply. I was leaning over the side of the rock, sliding on my belly to not fall. From there, I lit my torch with my lighter. That's when her voice toppled me like a vase. "Daddy?" I launched to my feet, swiping the empty air with a flaming torch, trying to see anything at all, but it was too far to the ground for the light to reach. "Come get me, please, I'm scared," the voice pouted from below. "Amy?" I muttered, staring at the nothingness over the cliff's edge. There was a terrifying delay before she spoke again. "Yes, it's me. Come get me, I'm scared." I waited a while. The torch in my hand seemed to whoosh as I swung it left to right, as I was trying to get an angle on the bottom of the ravine. After a while, the silence returned, save for the occasional wind running through my flame. I wanted to reply. I wanted to call her name and climb down there and give her all the big hugs she had missed out on and tell her what a brave girl she was. It chilled my bones to hear her once again, in the depths of that frigid ravine. I could only tell that I was crying when the tears finally journeyed from my numb cheek and wet my shirt. And I wanted to descend. I almost did. But I knew that the voice in the dark was only something pretending to be my daughter. I noticed the cuts and grazes which adorned my arms as I climbed the ladder back to the familiar basement light. Once above ground, I heaved the weighty concrete slab back into place and closed the hole. Amy's face fleetingly burned into my mind's eye. I'd be back for her. I was going to return. It wasn't her talking to me down there. It wasn't. I had to at least convince myself of that. Was I going mad? The couple said that they had seen her. She was down there somewhere in the inky abyss, cold and afraid. And she wasn't alone.